Hello, friends, and welcome to the Gray Podcast. My name is Carlos Cabrera Jr., and I am your host. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about stories to build up next week's episode of our guest, Jessica Cabrera, and we're also going to be talking about this week's spotlight. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into it and cue that intro music. All right, so in today's episode, it's going to be a shorter one because it's only a build up for next week. Um, we're going to be switching some things around here. We're actually going to start with the TWS instead of doing that halfway through like I usually do. We're actually going to talk about this week's spotlight first thing. But before we do that, I wanted to quickly, if you're watching, I want you to look at the hat that's on my head. It says the Gray Podcast in that leather patch. Here is another style. The Gray Podcast is coming out with the Gray is coming out with a style collection called Gray Style Collection, which is going to be merchandise, things like that. When the time comes, I will let you know. But these are more samples. Last week you got to see the T-shirt design. This week you're now seeing the hats. So two different hats right now. I love both of them. They're great quality. Obviously, we got the gray back style because of the gray, and then the leather patch, which I actually love both styles. I'm wearing the darker version tonight, but the lighter version is extremely nice and like I said, great quality. So actually, I'm going to leave that out. I am excited for anything that happens with this podcast at this point. It's already gotten to the extent that I never thought it would. So just looking at merchandise now, looking at the logo on hats and things like that is mind-boggling and it's super fantastic. So I want to thank you for all your support, for all your love, and all your continued support. And I'll make sure that this mug is not the only merchandise because this mug is for a child, apparently, like I've said before. But moving on, let's talk about this week's spotlight. This week's spotlight is actually this really cool local business. Staying local, let's keep it local, let's build local. And it's this local business that sells out of Artisan Mill, just like last week's, which was Timber Made. And Artisan Mill was obviously a TWS. This company, though, is not something that I personally would shop for because, it never would have caught my eye in the sense of something that I would use all the time. But Adriana actually came across it. She saw it. She mentioned it to me. And then I looked into it. And then they actually followed the Gray Podcast on Instagram. Um, and it was almost meant to be. And then I looked at their products, and I will gladly say that I will one use them to purchase gifts for Adriana and family friends like Jess, who's next week, or Michaela, who was the first guest, and they have great quality items. So this week's spotlight is Bella B Bags. So Bella B Bags is uh, it's just the style of the bag that is created by them is so beautiful, so unique. Um, the style really just pops. And obviously, I don't know a crazy amount about bags, but this is what I do know. I know that this local company stays local. They build local. It's homemade bags that are created right here in Pennsylvania. They're not the materials aren't uh, the bags aren't bought, they're not resold, they are handcrafted right here in Pennsylvania, right in your hometown. So this is one of those local companies that if you support, they need your support because it will not only help them grow, but it will help them expand and bring the beauty of local businesses of what they deserve. Because listen, there's nothing wrong with the big corporations and things like that, but you need to support local because local care about you. At the end of the day, you are just a number to the corporations. And I'm not trying to push on them and talk down on them because corporations are everywhere, but um, the big corp companies only view you as a number, and that's realistic. Uh, how many of the orders have you done to where you've actually talked to the owner? Well, guess what? Bella B Bags, you might have a chance to actually talk to the creator, the owner of their company by just purchasing their bags, by sharing their content on Instagram, by just reaching out to them. And guess what? They love your support, they love your feedback. Um, and I reached out to them and told them that they were going to be this week's spotlight, and they immediately got back to me, and we had a conversation back and forth, and it was fantastic. They are a great local company that deserves all your love, all your support. They started 4 years ago, and I'm going to look at my notes because I don't want to mess this up. Um, but they started 4 years ago, and it was created by Erica Eshelman. Um, and the reason why Bella B Bags was created, and this is a fantastic reason, is it was a way to manage seasonal depression. So the this company was built on just providing um, that gate to a way out, uh, just support and all these other things to where that's exactly what this podcast is to me. This podcast for me is for me to vent, for me to talk, for me to just open up without having to see a therapist because I have all these thoughts and things like that to where if I don't talk about it, I feel like my brain's going to explode sometimes. And that's exactly what this podcast is for me, is dealing with things that we deal with mentally all the time. Our mental health is so important. So this company, Bella B Bags, was created on that mindset of helping yourself being better and to improve yourself to help cope with different things. So um, they don't just make bags, they make it. There's like keychains. You got to check them out. They're on Instagram at Bella B Bags. I'll put the link down below. You'll see it on the Instagram stories, things like that. But definitely check them out. Bella B Bags. Give them a like, give them a chance, and share local, guys. Like we gotta support our local teams. We gotta. And moving on to the next topic for this episode, it is going to be a shorter episode, like I said before. But I wanted to give a little bit of a backstory of my baby sister, who is going to be next week's guest and our second guest on the podcast. Super excited to have her on, Jessica Cabrera. We're going to be talking about stories about us growing up and things like that. But the big thing I want to talk about with her is she was this local basketball star in our community. She is that basketball player that scored 1,000 points, and what made it so special is that the girl is, and I will confirm this next week with her, but I don't think she's even 5 foot, and I give her, I bust on her all the time because of that. But a girl that is only, let's just say, 5 foot and maybe less, scored 1,000 points, and that is one, almost unheard of, but two, such an accomplishment. So I do want to touch base on that and talk about that moment, how she felt, how she's feeling, looking back on it, things like that, because I was there and I remember how I feel about that. I mean, I still think about that day as such an accomplishment for not only her, but for our entire family because we worked on giving her all the support she needed. And when she accomplished that, we accomplished that because we truly believed in her, and it was a goal of hers from when she entered school and joined the team, and she accomplished it. So we definitely are going to want to talk about that. We're going to want to talk about her and I. She is getting married a month after I am. So that's something that is, I mean, just getting married in general. My baby sister is 8 years younger than me, and she's getting married this year. Blows my mind getting married this year, and I want to talk to her about like how she's feeling about that. Is she nervous? Things like that. Just your typical standard. What do you think? And what do you think about these moments and things like that? So um, we're definitely going to talk about that. And then I want to also get into obviously family stories, us growing up. I mean, listen, we were 8 years apart, 7, 8 years apart, to where I was out of high school. I was graduating high school when she was graduating elementary, and that's a huge gap. However, the way our relationship was I still like her and I, she's my only sibling. And I wanted a sibling so badly that when she was born, there was things that, I played video games with her. I played basketball outside with her. I didn't take it easy on her whatsoever. It was like we were only a couple years apart and not almost a decade apart. So I do want to get into a couple different stories with her. Um, so my sister and I, we did have our moments where we got into it, man. It was such a competition. And even though talking about, when we talk about her 1000 points and how it was such an accomplishment and how proud I was of her in that moment, I have to just state here that there there has always been a competition between her and I, always since the day she was born. It has always been, I can do this better than you. And even though in some ways it's been like we've kept it like submerged and like wouldn't let it out that way, it has always been an underlying factor in everything. Um, I I mean, when I was in middle school, I got named student of the year in 8th grade, and then in ninth grade, I was named class president. And I had these accomplishments in that aspect, and then I also played basketball and things like that. And I would look at her and I would tease her and I would say, "All right, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You can't beat that." And then the little girl went and scored 1,000 freaking points, like something that I never did. I didn't. I never even got close because I never played in varsity because I quit by then. Which is something we'll talk about, things like that. But it there's always been a competitive edge between my sister and I. We still have it to this day, to where it's not that we want to one up each other. That's not what I mean by the competitive side. It's that it's this special relationship that we have that is, I do this, now you do something better. And it's always encouraging each other, and it's always pushing each other to one up ourselves, because we want them to, I want her to one up me. She wants me to one up her, right? Um, which is a fantastic side, but again, it's that competitiveness that we have um, that makes us emotional at times as well. So I'm super excited to have her on the podcast. I can't wait to talk to her. She is, I mean, she just bought a house with her fiance. They have two cats and a dog. I mean, she is, uh, she works at the hospital almost full time, and then she goes to school full time. She's setting herself up to create a beautiful and wonderful career, and really set herself up for a lifetime, for a good and successful lifetime. So I am extremely excited to talk to her in next week's episode, and really touch on these stories of our relationship, and touch on these specific moments like her 1000 point, and really get into that. So, again, this week's episode was just kind of in like a preview of next week, but to also talk about this week's spotlight, which was Bella B Bags. Again, make sure you check out at Bella B Bags on Instagram. You can check us out at the Gray Podcast, at the Gray.podcast on Instagram. You can also check us out on Anchor.fm. I'm like losing my mind tonight. Hey, I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank you all for watching, and I want to thank you all for supporting. I hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday and an even better weekend. As always, welcome to the Gray.